Hey guys, welcome to my office. We have some very serious matters to discuss here today. So it may come as no surprise that I have been in a little bit of a slump. If you've been following me on TikTok, on Instagram, all I can talk about is the fact that for the past 2 months, I have been in a reading slump, a reading rut. And that is extremely discouraging, especially as somebody who is used to reading every second of the day. Suddenly going to reading like 3 books a month when usually I can read like 10. Yeah, that's giving slump behavior. So while I'm going through this, I thought, why not use my pain and my suffering to help the people? Because I do have some tips that I think could help people get out of a reading slump. I have gone through quite a bit of these and they've worked to a certain extent. Sometimes you do just have to ride it out, but sometimes changing your attitude towards reading, changing your habits can really help with getting out of a slump. Not only that, but I do have some recommendations, some books I'm planning on getting to help solidify my removal from this slump, and just things of that nature. To start off, I will say, when it comes to a reading slump, a lot of people will say, don't force yourself to read. Ride it out. Like, don't get into that headspace where reading becomes a chore. I get that, right? I totally do, and I respect it. However, I do think that there is a middle ground. I think that we can acknowledge that being in a reading slump sucks, and if you read so frequently, it's super discouraging when suddenly it feels like your brain has turned off and you don't have the ability to do something that you spent hours and hours and hours a day doing. So yes, you should not force yourself to continue doing something that isn't fun in the moment. However, for somebody like me, a reading slump very rarely means that nothing is good to pick up. It just means that like I have a hard time finishing the books, or I'll read still, like I'm still reading, I'm still picking up books. I still have that desire to read books, maybe not as much as I did when I'm like reading extremely avidly, but I still have that desire to pick them up. I feel like these steps can help you get back into the groove of things and fall back in love with your favorite hobby. Okay, enough of the yapping, let's get into it. Tip number 1, read shorter books. If you're like me and fantasy tends to be a genre that you gravitate towards, fantasy books are very rarely short. They are usually 350 pages minimum. I will say that when it comes to fantasy over the past year, I still love it, I just read it a lot less, but it's definitely not the genre that I gravitate towards when I'm in the middle of a slump because they're usually so much longer. The reason I say reading shorter books can really help with the slump is because you can feel so discouraged when you're not getting through the books that you want to get through when you're in a slump. And if the books are shorter, you're still feeling like you're reading books, but they're not as intimidating. You can say like, oh, this book was 150 pages, but I finished a book. You feel me? Because we are in the spooky season, one short book that I've really been wanting to read is Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. This is a novella. It's about 5 night shift workers, an ancient cemetery, and an open grave. Every night in the college's ancient cemetery, 5 people cross paths as they work the late shift. A bartender, a rideshare driver, a hotel receptionist, the unofficial steward of the derelict church that looms over them, and the editor-in-chief of the college paper, always in search of a story. One dark October evening in the defunct churchyard, they find a hole that wasn't there before. A fresh open grave where no grave should be, but who dug it and for whom? Atmospheric and eerie with the ensemble cast her fans love and delightfully familiar academic backdrop, Graveyard Shift is a modern gothic tale in If We Were Villains author M.L. Rio's inimitable style. I don't think I have to have read If We Were Villains to read this, so this is definitely something I want to read before October is over. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think this is completely a standalone. It kind of made me doubt it when I read With the ensemble cast her fans love, but maybe I don't need to know, you know what I mean? Really excited about this one. But for a book that's really been helping getting me out of a slump, Big Fan by Alexandra Romanoff. This book is 160 pages and it feels like a fever dream. Maya was a rising star in the political world until her ex-husband's high-profile sex scandal nearly derailed her career. Landing a gubernatorial candidate like Teresa Powell is the fresh start she desperately needs, a chance to focus on meaningful work and leave the drama behind. But then an email from her past sends her world spinning. Charlie, former lead singer of Mischief, the boy band that fueled her teenage obsession, is staging a solo comeback and wants Maya's help. Turns out she likes the grown-up Charlie and his genuine engagement with the world. Maya isn't about to ditch her political ambitions for a teenage crush, but if she can leverage Charlie to draw attention to the policies she cares about, shouldn't she give it a try? This was so steamy and really entertaining, especially as somebody that lives in the DC area. I was like, oh my god, I recognize this, like I know how this works, like come on. I literally read this in a couple hours. So quick. I partially listened to the audiobook, I partially read the physical, and I felt so accomplished when I finished it. Tip number 2, change the formats you're reading in. Personally, for me, I tend to gravitate equally towards Kindle and physical books. Like, I will go back and forth, but I know a lot of people will read most of the books that they read in a year on their Kindle, or most of the books they read in a year in physical format. I will say when I am in a slump, I usually have read print books back to back to back to back, and I don't know why that's the case. I don't know what the science behind that is, but it is my experience. So I typically find that going over to my Kindle helps a lot. I have the Kindle Paperwhite, for anyone who's wondering. I absolutely love it. Mwah, she's my baby, okay? Being able to adjust the font size, the color of the page you're reading on, it just feels like a more dynamic way to read. So I absolutely love going over to my Kindle, but if you're a Kindle person, definitely switch over to print books. Like, physically touching the book can help so much more than you would imagine. Number 3 is so key, especially if you are stuck in your ways. Switch genres. I would say that I definitely do have my genre preferences, but I have no problem with branching out into different types of genres. I always tell people that if you're truly the type of person that can only read one genre, like romance or just fantasy or just lit fic or just nonfiction, pick something that feels very close to your favorite genre. A lot of people love magical realism in romance books, hence the popularity of the 7-Year Slip, but one book that I always recommend to people who are romance book lovers and want that magical realism aspect but want to try something different is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I haven't read the other books in this series. I've only read the first one, but this book just felt like the perfect transition away from romance books in the summer. I think I read this in the summer when I was only reading romance books because the romance genre had me in a chokehold this summer, okay? So I decided to pick this up and it still gave me the light feeling that romance gives me. Don't get me wrong, this book definitely has some themes that will make you sniffle and maybe cry a little bit. And the writing was easy to understand. It's about human relationships, missed opportunities, and the enduring power of love. Also a good slump buster because of how short it is. If you don't typically read literary fiction and you're like, I keep seeing people recommending authors like Sally Rooney, but I've tried Sally Rooney and I don't like Sally Rooney. Here are 2 lit fic recommendations that I have for you that I think you would like if lit fic is not typically something that you do enjoy. Number 1, we have Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufy Thorpe. This book made me laugh. It made me go, huh? It made me go, it made me do a lot of things. I felt a lot of emotions while I was reading this. This is a bold, laugh out loud, funny, and heartwarming story about one young woman's attempt to navigate adulthood, new motherhood, and her meager bank account in our increasingly online world. From the Penn/Faulkner finalist and critically acclaimed author of The Knockout Queen. This book keeps you interested because there's a shock every few pages. You're like, who are we dealing with? Who are these interesting characters? And why are their lives like this? How did we end up here? The world is truly rooting against our girl Margot, and although that makes you very sad, it makes the story very interesting because you see how she constantly gets herself out of these ruts over and over and over again. I definitely had a good time with this. It is very weird, but like in a good way. Also, my love Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang. Some people probably wouldn't describe this as literary fiction because it definitely is very heavily plot based. Like it's still character driven, but there's a plot there for sure. This would probably fall more so into contemporary fiction, but it does have literary fiction elements to me. Yellow Face is borderline a thriller. Like, this FMC is so terrifying. She is so scary. Being in her mind makes you feel like you need to take your brain out and dunk it in ice water and then put it back in. Tip number 4, read standalone books. Do not try to read series. This is a mistake I made when I was in a slump maybe 7-8 months ago. It was a very short slump, but it was a slump nonetheless. Still traumatized from it to this day. But you are going to want the satisfaction of having a beginning, a middle, and an end in the book. And with series, even if you'll get that with each individual book in a way, you're constantly gonna have that suspense towards the end of the book where you're like, I know this is gonna continue into another book, so you're not gonna it's not gonna scratch that itch in your brain. So I always recommend sticking to a standalone, especially because if you start a series in a slump, odds are you're not going to finish that series. You're probably not. There are so many standalone books that I love, but I have one romance book and one fantasy book that I'm like, yes, these are like tried and true. I really love these. For romance, Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This is technically in an interconnected like standalone duet, but this is a standalone, okay? The second book hasn't even come out yet, so you can treat this as a standalone. This is like 350 pages, so I feel like it's a pretty good length romance book. I am of the belief that a romance book should not be more than 400 pages. Like, you can maybe get with that 415, like 415, maybe 420 pages, and that's fine. But if I see a romance book that's 500 to 600 pages, nah, I can't do it. It's not right for me. It's always described by people as the pregnancy trope book that gets people who hate the pregnancy trope to love the pregnancy trope. A hot one-night stand and an unexpected pregnancy lead a young woman to someone she can depend on. That's our boy Bo. The MMC in this is just so charming. He's like hot nerd vibes. Love that. And then for our fantasy book, A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed is a really easy fantasy book to read. It's not gonna have a lot of world building that's gonna confuse you. It's dark academia. So if you like that, this will definitely be your vibe. The atmosphere is so addictive. It's very lush. So if you're like, well, I love fantasy, but I'm in a slump and I don't wanna read like a super long fantasy book and I also don't want it to have like 150 pages of world building, A Study in Drowning is for you. Two rival students investigate a reclusive author's legacy, piecing together clues through his letters, books, and diaries, and they discover that the house's foundation isn't the only thing that can't be trusted. There are dark forces, both mortal and magical, conspiring against them, and the truth may bring them both to ruin. Yeah, it will. Now, number 5, you're gonna be mad at me. You're gonna be mad at me, but it's true. You need to let go of this desire to read every second of the day. Like, reading slumps definitely happen more to avid readers because they're constantly telling themselves that your main hobby needs to be reading all the time. When it's like, you could be watching films, you could be watching TV shows, and you can still have that hour or 30 minutes even at night or in the morning where you just pick up a book and you take the pressure off. The reason why I say you don't need to be reading every second of the day is because I know for a lot of people, when you're in a slump, you feel so discouraged by the fact that you literally cannot pick up a book. When you take the pressure off to say, okay, I'm not going to read as much as I did in the past, at least for now, but I can still find time, like 30 minutes in the morning or at night to read, you won't be mad at yourself when it takes you 2 weeks to finish a book. Tip number 6, curated playlists. Now, I have a few perfect playlists on my Spotify, so if you want to check those out, you definitely should. When I'm listening to music while I read, the songs need to speak to my soul. And not only do they need to speak to my soul, they need to be connected to the book that I'm reading and the vibe. I can only listen to instrumentals while I'm reading. If you listen to music with words while you're reading, that's more power to you. Your brain must have some extra synapses that just mine doesn't. But I'm telling you, if you just go to Spotify, let's say you're reading Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, right? This is a dark academia book. So when you go onto Spotify and you type in Ninth House instrumentals, literally a playlist comes up. A playlist of instrumentals that immerse you into the world of Ninth House appear. Or a playlist like reading fantasy, no vocals will come up. People have done the work for you, there's no excuse. And the reason why I say these help a lot is because you can just completely block out the world. Put your headphones on and just dive into the story. For me, when I'm reading a romance book that I feel is going to take my heart and squeeze it and then like throw it in the trash and then put it back inside my chest, I listen to my Instrumentals You Feel on a Molecular Level playlist. This is my pride and joy, okay? It's about 2 hours. I'm currently rereading Happy Place by Emily Henry, right? This book and I have a soul tie. We are connected on a deep level together. So when I'm listening to my playlist while I'm reading this, I feel like I'm going back to the place I was in when I read this book for the first time. I also have a playlist titled Reading, but in parentheses, dramatically. This one's almost 5 hours. It's 4 hours and 40 minutes. And it has like film scores, TV show scores, all that jazz on it. And I'm very proud of this playlist as well. These two are truly, I'm more proud of them than I am of my degree. Now, speaking of Happy Place, this takes me into tip number 7, reread your favorite books. So when I felt like I was still struggling with my slump, I thought, what's an author that I feel can make me feel something again? And that's always gonna be Emily Henry. So it was a toss-up between this and Beach Read, but I just went with this because a lot of people think that her books are summertime books. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. Oh, no pun intended. But I truly am gonna go out on a limb here and say that Emily Henry's books are actually for the fall. Or at least Happy Place and Beach Read feel like fall books to me. Don't look at the cover, I know it looks like summer, okay? Beach Read, that's a fall book. I don't care what you have to say. Tip number 8, completely abandon your TBR. Act like she doesn't exist. I'm personally a mood reader. Okay, so I'm not really a TBR girl. I try to make them and I follow them loosely, but it's never that serious to me. You need to act like you have never had a TBR in your life. You need to form yourself. You need to mold yourself into a mood reader, because the only thing that's gonna get you out of a slump is being okay with trying literally anything and everything, even maybe going out to the library or to the bookstore and getting new books that you've never heard of. None of this TBR, my TBR, you're gonna be stuck in that slump forever. Number 9 is a personal favorite of mine. Watch bookish content. I love watching booktubers, book talkers, literally everybody who makes book content when I'm in a slump, because I feel like I can live vicariously through other people. And I'm still collecting recs while I'm in a slump. I may even collect some recs that would help me get out of a slump. You can still engage with your favorite hobby while not doing the actual activity, in the same way that people who crochet can watch crochet tutorials without actually crocheting, or in the same way that people who love drawing or painting can watch videos about drawing and painting without actually doing it. Some of my favorite booktubers, Lexi, aka Newly Nova, love her. Obviously Jack Edwards, love him. Heather McClary, my girl Heather, love. I also love watching Sarah Caroli. Maya Beatrice is also another girl that I love on YouTube. She makes such long vlogs, which I personally love because I put them on in the background. It's also great because she makes videos that aren't just about reading, but she very much includes reading into all of her videos because it's a hobby that she loves to do. And then lastly, Leah Crumpton, so comforting. The vibes are right when I'm watching her videos. I get so many recs from her that are on my never-ending TBR, in quotes TBR, meaning just the long list of books that I don't know if I'll ever get to in my life. There are definitely some that I'm missing, but those are some big ones that I watch pretty frequently. Then tip number 10, annotate your books. Highlight your books. Don't be afraid of your books. I know I used to be the type of person, I would be like, no folding the corners, the condition needs to be pristine. I underline, highlight, write, and bend, throw. I just want my books now to look like they've been loved, which is such a complete 180 from how I used to be. But the reason why I also say that is because annotating can be such a fun way to immerse yourself in the story. You can do super heavy annotations like I did for Ninth House. Like I would say that I did some pretty heavy tabbing in this. Or it can literally just be, there are 4 tabs in Legendborn. There would probably be way more if I did it today, but there are 4 tabs in here. Like, just engage with the text. If you're not typically an annotator and you're intimidated by how other people annotate, it's not that serious, you know? Just do what you want to do. A lot of people ask me how I annotate my books, and truthfully, I have no guide for you. I pick some random colors. I used to match the book covers to the colors on my tabs, but I don't necessarily think about that as much anymore. I may sometimes do it, but I'm not that like crazy about it. And just tab things that you like, tab plot points that had you gasping or fighting for your life. This is the kind of stuff that makes you fall back in love with reading that a lot of people neglect because they just kind of wanna go through the story super quickly. Just take your time and enjoy. At the end of the day, this is your favorite hobby. You fell in love with it for a reason. You don't need to be rushing. Those are all of my tips for getting out of a reading slump. I will say one of the things that this reading slump has taught me, this specific one, because it's been 2 months and your girl has been struggling, is that just because I'm in a slump doesn't mean that I'm not reading. Like, I have still been reading books in these past couple of months. I've been putting way less pressure on myself to go from book to book to book. I've been really enjoying relaxing, taking my time with the text, and embracing this point in my reading journey. If y'all have any other tips for getting out of a slump, definitely leave them down below. I can slowly but surely feel myself getting out of this rut, so hopefully that continues. But as usual, thank you so much for watching. I hope you got some good tips from this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!